So I don't see an indication. Does anybody see an indication that the recording has started?
Yes, it started.
Okay,
The
good.
red is
Um,
started.
all right. So, welcome to Sunday Sangha. At UK time, this is probably Sunday morning. And that today Dean has asked a question about a sutta. Um, Actually, the sutta is Sutta number 111 in the Majjhima Nikaya, and the name of the sutta is One by One as They Occur. And we need to keep track of that one by one as they occur, because that's, in fact, much of the teaching. What is it that we're going to be looking at one by one as they occur? Now, when the mind is in an ordinary state, that means that much of the things that occur one by one are unwholesome. But if we can somehow manage to get the mind into a state where it's wholesome, then whatever occurs one by one are going to be wholesome things, not unwholesome things. And this is an important quality, is that once we get far enough into the practice, then we abandon having unwholesome things to look at, so that we're going to start looking at the things that are wholesome. Now, in this sutta, it talks about Sariputta taking a fortnight to go through this list of wholesome things one by one as they occur. But there's some background to this. And the background is that Sariputta was already on the spiritual path when he met the Buddha, that he just didn't come right out of the ordinary life, that he had already been practicing. So it's quite probable then that the 2 week period of time that we're talking about was not the basic foundation of meditation, of getting his mind into being able to control and manage the first jhana. He was already there. That's one of the ways that we can look at it. But the sutta is not actually clear about it. But based upon everyone's practice, getting into that first jhana is probably 90% of the work. So you could say then that that fortnight was spent when he was doing the examination of the things that were wholesome, because that's what the thing is, the sutta is about. That in fact, it starts off after that paragraph when it says that it only took him a fortnight to do this. The first thing it says is, having been completely secluded from unwholesome thoughts and unwholesome states of mind, Sariputta entered and abided into the first jhana, which meant that he was probably doing that right from the get-go. That's before the 2 weeks started, or as the 2 weeks started. Okay, so now let's go through all of the things that are there that are wholesome. And that the first items on that list, one by one as they occur, are actually the jhana factors of the first jhana. So as we're going into the first jhana, the thing to do is to take the factors of the first jhana as our objects. And one of the objects that we're going to have is the object of being free from the hindrances, that we're applying the mind to be free from hindrances and then being able to sustain that. So applying the mind to the hindrances and sustaining it in a wholesome state is basically the first thing that's on that list, the wholesome stuff to do. In other words, how is my meditation? How is my sati? How is my investigation? And we start looking at all of those factors of the jhanas with that discernment, the discerning eye. We're investigating the states that we're in. Now, when we go into the other jhana factors of the first jhana, like how good is my piti, that actually is now the introduction into the second jhana. that when we no longer are paying attention to the words that we're saying and the wholesome things that we're saying to get us into a really, really good state, the second jhana is actually paying attention to that really good state that we're in that doesn't really require us talking ourselves into it anymore. There we are. And so we change our object from the object of uh, how nice it is into the object of voicelessly just experiencing how lovely, how nice, how blissful, if you want to use the word bliss, or how relaxed. Okay, so in fact, going through the jhanas then are going through the various feeling processes that we have. And the second jhana is the expression of how good can we feel? How good can you feel? What's your top note? What's your highest soprano note of absolute best feelings? Generally, it has the feeling to do of being a winner, being on top of your world, being a champion, being really, really good enough. The feeling of being an insider, of being at home. These are the very best feelings that we can have. And so we can talk ourselves into having those feelings, and then we just sit there experiencing those feelings of how nice this is. Okay. Now, the Bhikkhu Buddhadasa points this out, but it's already quite easily seen in the suttas that really, really peak experience of how really good can I feel is not really a long-lasting thing. But that doesn't mean that we don't develop the skill of being able to create it. All right. It's sort of like some kind of Chinese cooking. They use a very, very hot flame, but not for long. Okay, so we can see the piti then is a very, very hot, exalted, superior feeling, very energetic. But then we cool it off down to the next level, which was actually the way that we got into that state of piti was through sukha. So after we hit that peak, we come back into the state of sukha. An example with that of when they climb very high mountains like Everest, one of the important things that they do is they establish a base station. They haul up all of their gear to that base station, and then they sit in that base station and get acclimated, and then they go to the top, to the summit. Guess what? They don't spend very much time at that summit. They come back to the base station. So think of that base station then as the sukha, and that the piti is kind of a very high event kind of thing, the top of your mountain. Okay, that we're all mountain climbers, except that here we're not climbing the physical mountains, which has got names. We're climbing the mountain of the mind. How high can your mind go? And that's the piti. But then we come back down to the base station, which would be then the third jhana. And that third jhana is the experience of sukha. But then we can let that feeling also subside. And when it subsides, it goes down to what we would call upekkha, or very, very restful. Now, we can think of this also in the sense of brain waves, that we're actually learning to manipulate the brain waves. That when someone is very busy and very active, then they have as high as gamma rays, which is about a frequency of about 35 cycles a second. But the level of relaxation is down at the level of alpha. And that's what we're intending to operate with, is to being able to control our brain waves so that we can, and by the way, for most people, there's no particular one frequency of a brainwave, that they're just all over the place. That they have a short frequency and then a long frequency and then a short frequency, very noisy within the mind. And what we're actually practicing is getting the mind in a stable state so that it can be at a particular frequency. And the frequency that we're looking for is the alpha wave, which is about 8 to 12, maybe around 10 cycles per second, which is actually what most meditation mystics and all throughout literature talk about, that that's the mind moment, which is about a tenth of a second. And that we can begin to manipulate how we feel, in the sense of, are we relaxed or are we uptight? Are we excited? That in fact the frequency of the brain then determines how excited we are, and that we're going to start to slow that down. And when we get it slow, we experience, wow, I can do this. And that's the piti. That's what we call the samma sankappa, or the success story that we begin to tell ourselves. I can do this. Oh, how marvelous this is. And then by talking to ourselves like this in the first jhana, that's what sets us up so that we can experience the second jhana, which means we don't even have to tell ourselves how good we feel. We're too busy just feeling good. But then the baseline is to come back to the first jhana, that we don't want to go back into the ordinary world, because the ordinary world is painful. That we want to be able to establish a base of operation, that most of the work that we're going to put in is to be able to get the mind into the first jhana, and then apply it and sustain it, and apply it and sustain it. And any time that we're not in that state, we want to hop right back into it. That in fact, that state of being, that any time that we're not in it and we want to hop right back into it, that's what's referred to as access concentration, to where we can go right back into it. We can go gather those factors. They got scattered, but here they are. Let's go put them back together again and get the mind in a really good state. Okay, so after we get to the opeka of the fourth jhana, now the mind is so stable, so solid, so relaxed, that it can begin to see the way that the mind itself processes data, so that we can come up with the images that the mind makes. This is the paticca. That's why the four jhanas and paticca samuppada are so deeply interrelated, is that we have to get the mind settled down so that we can actually see, rather than just experience, or let us say accept, the paticca samuppada as an intellectual teaching. We begin to experience it. We begin to actually see that we can, in fact, manipulate our perception. We can, in fact, begin to manipulate our salayatana, and the salayatana is our memory system. How are we going to manipulate our memory systems? Is by intentionally adding good, happy, wholesome memories, one after another, rather than just letting things occur and build up haphazardly. So we're actually going to intentionally give ourselves happy memories, good solid memories. And so then when we go to understand things from our past, that's the past that we'll remember things from. So that we can actually then begin to automatically feel good, because we've got it stored in our memory base, rather than going back to the old default of how it was when we were a child. So, Dean, this is where you were talking. Okay, we've got to get our mind fit for work, so that we can then just start looking at very wholesome things. And eventually, when the mind gets stable, we get it down to where we can listen, we can see the mind when we're very, very quiet, very stable, and the wave forms actually go kind of below the alpha level, down into maybe the theta level. I'm not sure about all the words, but we begin to slow the mind's cycles down. And that way we begin to see those processes as they're occurring.
Okay, before we get there, before we go off further again, your friend Tan Damavito, is that his name?
Dhammavitu, yes,
He speaks about, he has a good lecture series on YouTube, and he speaks about And I can get this far, like I can experience the pity at times, but he talks like it's like for most people, it's like when we go up to a front door, but we don't go in through the front door, but the pity is just coming out of the front door, bits and pieces, and shooting little bits out of us. How do we get through that fucking front door? I can experience the pity. I have loads of times, but how do I walk through that front door
Okay.
and get the real deal? You know what I mean?
Here is the secret to that. And that is that we got ourselves as far as we did get by working on being satisfied, coming back to the sukha, that everything is okay, and we begin to feel that way. And now you're talking about getting something, like getting through some door, which means that now you've got thoughts about there's got to be some place to go and something to do, that you want to get something, which means now you're no longer satisfied. So when you get to that state, you're not progressing in your first jhana, you have actually moved back into ordinary thinking. The way to work with this then is to say, oh, never mind, this is good enough. Let me just sit here and experience things the way that they really are. This is the part where we really do have to get a very firm handle on that first jhana. Because if we want the second jhana, the wanting of the second jhana is in fact an unwholesome thought, and we have just destroyed our first jhana. That we have to get completely into the first jhana and get completely satisfied with it. That we have to practice it to where we can bring it on quickly, and then we have to practice it so that we can maintain it. And once we can maintain it, which means we can stay in that position of not wanting anything, not wanting the second jhana, not wanting this, that, or the other thing, not wanting to go through some magical door that I've created in my mind, but rather, can I just be satisfied, knowing that all of this pity is coming out from something? And so let's look at the experience of the pity. How good does this feel? Wow, this feels so great. This is good enough. This is the way that we practice it. Rather than saying, where does this all lead? It doesn't lead anywhere. It has to be developed right where it is. So we accept it the way that it is. This is how I feel right now. Isn't that marvelous? And so we continue to practice it that way, that this is good enough. And pretty soon it begins to build. But if you get...
So I leave somebody else ask a question now, but one thing I want to say first is I'm on your team with about a year, roughly a year, and I tell you, on a subtle level, you have changed my life. Thanks very much. I leave it at that.
Yes. Okay. And what is that? That we learn to become satisfied. That things wind up being good enough. That when the students first start talking to me, they want this, they want that, they're unsatisfied, and then they begin to understand that all the first jhana is actually the quality of being satisfied. That when we get satisfied enough, then we don't have to talk ourselves into being satisfied anymore. We can just experience it. And that's the progress that we make. But when we start wanting something new, that's what prevents us from getting something new. Because we're actually, by wanting something new, we're just practicing the same old stuff we've been doing our whole lives, which is wanting something new. And when we stop wanting something new and really satisfied with what we've got right now, that's when we actually are making good progress. Everything is backwards in that in regard. That when we want something, we're not progressing. If we want to progress, we're not progressing. When we become satisfied with where we are, that's progress. Reminds me of a story, by the way. The story has to do with an old book that was written many centuries ago. The name of the book is called Pilgrim's Progress. Do you know what a pilgrim is? There's one somebody who goes from holy site to holy site. He's a pilgrim. He's on a journey. Well, what happens to the pilgrim when he gets to the holy site? Does he stay at the holy site, or does he just plan on his next trip to the next holy site? The question is, can you get yourself into that holy state and then stop planning for the next stop? Because you've already stopped. Here you are. Stay in your holy place. That's the whole point of getting into a holy place, is so that you can maintain it. You can stay there. And so that holy state that we're looking for is actually the sustaining of the first jhana, when the mind is whole. It's not disintegrated. But when we want the next step, now we've brought in a disintegration. We've disintegrated the mind into wanting something that we don't have. And what we really need to practice is being satisfied with how marvelous things are already right now. Does anybody have any comments about this? Yasin, do you have any comments? So let's just sit and be happy. Just sit and be satisfied. That's all there is to it, is just to sit and be satisfied.
Since nobody else is talking, what I will say is, when I was, the best time I was at getting up the pity was when I was nurturing each single breath at each time. That's when I had the best success at getting up the pity.
Well, what you're saying is that with each of those breaths, each one of them, you were really there with it. Being in this present moment is what brings on that sense of joy, of being alive.
And then I had people throwing shit at me, so I kind of went back the way again. But anyway, I get back there.
Well, the people were throwing what people throw. You didn't like it and called it shit. And that was what drove you out of the first jhana. They didn't do it. You did it.
And also now I know why you shouldn't give yourself labels. I made myself a fucking huge target as well by telling people how happy and confident I was since I started fucking following the teachings of the Buddha. And I made myself a total target.
Well, now that you've set that up, you can remember to do that every time that they make you into a target. You can say, "Yeah, you got me." You could be happy too.
But the biggest thing for me, Dhammarato, is definitely the attitude change. For the first time ever, I've had a kind of a winner's happy attitude, and I was never like that. I have a tough. I'm working a job there now at the moment in a meat factory, and it would be considered a tough, mundane job. But I'm just able to accept it and fucking. Because it's physical, I'm able to do a lot of practice. This practice with it, and it just makes the job so much easier. So much easier.
I love to hear success stories.
Anyway, someone else must be there. They must be doing something in the background. So Veda, you come in and ask Dhammarato a question, will you?
I do have a question.
Okay.
If one is in this happy state, being with this you just talked about, could that be in just every situation, in a destructive situation or whatever? How does it relate to where I am in the world, so to speak?
All right. The first thing is that we have to recognize a disgusting situation.
Mm-hmm.
and eventually you'll recognize them in advance so that you don't get yourself into disgusting situations. Okay, so that's part of the skill, is to recognize that there are many times when we would be better off if we were not in this situation. And so we can walk away. All right.
Okay.
Or we cannot even walk into it because you can see that there's a sticky situation, let us say, in that room. Don't go in that room.
Mm-hmm.
If you hear somebody arguing in that room, don't go in that room. That's the kind of way that's the way of wisdom. And that's the ultimate way. Okay. But let's say that we weren't already in that position and now we find ourselves in that situation. There we are, we're in the room with it. The question then is, well, who is it that's in the room? Because you can be just an observer in that room without having to pick up all the stuff that's being thrown around. This would be the next level, is just to be the observer. But almost always, when let us say flack or whatever is thrown around, we want to be there to pick it up.
I stopped doing that most of the time. Yeah.
Well, that's the whole trick, is you just don't pick up the stuff that they're throwing around. It's not our business. That we can avoid it. We don't have to get into it. There's some situations where let me talk about it like this. Just there's been another recent killing in Memphis, and that you could see that the police were doing their police thing the way that police do it, that the boy who got killed was resisting the police. He didn't like it. He was trying to pick it up and argue with them and tell them that what they were doing was not right. Well, of course it was not right what they were doing, but telling them so when they're in that state is not a wise idea. Running away from them, getting afraid, is what he did. He got really, really intensely afraid of the police, and because of that, they killed him, because he was trying to escape from them. Okay, so we all do that in little situations, in the sense of that people will do what they want to do, and we try to escape from it and argue with them and try to set them straight, etc., like that, which just makes everything a whole lot worse. And so the easy way that this young man could have handled it was completely going limp, telling the officers, I surrender completely, and just go completely limp. If he had gone completely limp on them, then maybe some compassion would have shown. Oh, what's wrong with this guy? Oh, he's completely out of it now. But as long as he's resisting them, they're going to keep, let us say, trying to exert their power over him. So that happens in a normal, ordinary place. That's what bullies are all about. It happens at school. It happens in the workplace. It happens out on the street. It happens everywhere. And we as Dhamma dudes have to learn that we don't have to resist. We don't have to come up with, oh, that's me you're hurting. But whether we can go, in fact, we can go limp, or a way that I described it is to take a hike to get out of it. And if you can't get out of it, just be quiet. Just sit. Don't do anything. That in fact, when the bullies are not getting anything out of you, they'll go find somebody else to harass. And so becoming very silent, just sitting, don't do anything at all. Or if you're really, really together, you can just smile at them with statements like, oh, that's very interesting. But what we do is we make ourselves targets. That I can reiterate this, we've just talked about it. There's a sutta number 63 in the Majjhima Nikaya that has the story of this guy who gets shot with an arrow. And that in this sutta, the guy not only gets shot with the arrow, but he waits until the doctor comes, and then he argues with the doctor. Now, this is what we ordinarily do. That when we're out there in the field and somebody shoots an arrow towards us, an arrow of an unhappy remark or whatever like this that you and Dean both have been talking about, we actually make ourselves the target. We stand up and let that arrow hit us. But an advanced student of the Dhamma is going to stand out of the way of those arrows. He's not going to get hit. And a slightly less advanced student is going to get hit because he couldn't completely get out of the way, but he's going to remove that arrow immediately just to take it out. Oh, that's not me. Okay, but the best thing to do is to just let it go right by you, like this. You know, the arrow's coming this way, and and it just goes right. I saw that, and it missed me. Okay, so that means that we don't have to stand up to get hit with that arrow, which means that we don't have to feel afraid of the person who is shooting at us. Whatever it is that they're shooting at us, they don't know me. They can't hit me as a target. Only I can hit me as a target. I have to actually make myself a target. That's what the self is that it's a target that's in danger. And so all you have to do in the situation is that if you become the target of somebody else's let us say complaints, you can just sit there and perhaps smile, because it's not you. Whatever is coming at you is something that came out of their mind, not yours. There's no reason for you to pick that stuff up and stick it into your mind like you would stick yourself with an arrow. And so the kind of language for the first jhana would be, oh, that's not me. Or look, they missed me. Or in another context, we could say, oh, that's not my business. I mean, you've seen things on television and YouTube and whatever about politics. And instead of saying, oh, ain't it awful that this party or this politician or that politician does this, that, and the other thing, the better way to say it is, that's not my business. Let them do what they want to do. I'm just here enjoying the show. And so we don't get involved with it, that we can, in fact, stop caring about what people say. Because what people say about you is not you.
Now I see that way of saying it. That's really good to hear in this context. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's not you.
Yeah. I've been thinking about that word, me and so on, the self and all of this, but this clarifies a lot what that is about. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. That if we are undefined, then when people define us, they missed, because they've given a definition to something that is a moving target. You're, in fact, that's the whole point about in the sutras about what is personality view, is stop having a view that you've got a personality. That you don't have a personality. The personality that you have is a moving target. It's changing all the time. It's not fixed. It's not set. And that leads then to the most important part of that teaching is that means then that we can change. We are not doomed to repeat our past over and over again, that we can do something wisely now because we're looking at what's going on. So Does anybody else have anything like this? Kath, it's been a while. What you up to now? Have you had that conversation with your mom yet?
Uh, I've been kind of pecking at the seeds, you know. I haven't really jumped in the whole. I haven't really had like this deep conversation because I still really feel like uh, it's much better to just kind of give her compliments. Like I've been telling her food is really like way more than I have. Like her food has been really nice. I usually don't say those kinds of things, but I know how much I have noticed how much it affects her, you know. So
Yes. Knowing that, pour it on. Start
yeah.
appreciating many things that she does. Whenever she comes in the room, hi, I'm glad to see you.
Mm.
Okay, really start to treat her well. And the next part of that is that recognize that every time that you do that, in a way, you're forgiving her for all of the stuff that you've been holding against her all of this time.
Yeah, it's quite literally feeling poisoned, you know, inside yourself. So I see that clearly as like blatantly completely confronted by it. It's just in me, and I you know, why would I want to carry that? So I just keep piling it on, but I guess the thought of having some really deep conversation squirms me inside, you know. But I think I will I will before I leave here, I'm definitely going to attempt it, you know, some kind of format. I know how good it will be anyways for myself, so
Yes, it will be enormously valuable for her and you. And I really do like your build up to that.
yeah.
Of telling her that you enjoy her food and start to tell her all of the little things you begin to enjoy that she's that way. And then you can actually open up and tell her that you have been holding a bunch of stuff against her and that you're letting that go because you want to be really close friends with her. I mean, this is something that all of us needed to do when we were young, and we didn't do it. And that's square things around with our parents.
Yeah, because I know we're all gonna be dead, so it's like I think it's good, you know. I mean, they are quite more quicker than me, so it's
Hmm.
best to do it, you know. I was told that before someone told me about, you know, like it's, or I mean, I know a lot of people when their parents die, they have a lot of like regret and they have a lot of noise in their head because they never really expressed certain things. So yeah.
Our society actually has it set up that way, that it's a common thing for teenage boys in the Western society to kind of have it out with their dad. A big blow up, that it just builds and builds and builds. And that quite often the things that the son and the father are arguing about is merely the kind of language that they're using to describe the same thing. They both agree with each other. They just want to fight. um, the son wants to establish his manhood, while the father wants to reestablish his fatherhood, which are naturally in conflict with one another. And so the way that we have to learn to do that wisely is to come out of those roles of son growing up or father, etc., so that we can actually be friends with one another. And what you're doing with your mom now will fit right into that, to start making friends with her. Because ultimately, that's what you want to do with your dad also, is to have him to become a friend. And for some of us, that sounds almost terrifying.
Yeah, definitely. It's I think with the father, it's a different situation. You know, it's not the same as the mother. I don't think anyway. It is in a
Well,
sense, but it's not. You know.
well, it is the same, and the whole series is the same. What's different is your degree of bad feelings.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and it's the approach too. I think it's slightly different with the woman. For myself,
Yes.
anyway.
Well,
Uh,
that's because mommies always are the ones who take care of the little kids in the beginning, and so our stronger relationship is almost always with mommy.
mm,
But that's how our societies operate, and so the daddies don't ever see tender infants as tender infants. They always see them as little kids that are just a little me. To where mothers will see their tender infants, even when they grow up, they still have the idea of this kid, this 19-year-old boy is still a tender infant in my arms, right? And so
mm.
there's that different perspective that the parents have because of our society, and so you can fit in with your mom then by appreciating her and all that she's doing for you and get close to her like that. And the way that you can do that with your dad is by beginning to agree with everything that he says. You'd be surprised that you probably already do anyway.
Yeah, I've just kind of because I just agree with everything. I don't even, you know,
But
I
now
just
you're
agree.
going to do it with gusto, wholeheartedly. You're right, Dad. Wow, I
Yeah,
hadn't looked at it like that before. You're absolutely right. And so that's the way to begin uh, your healing of your relationship with your parents. And I highly recommend that to everybody, is to start making friends with your parents. Start bringing back that sense of community within your own family that is quite often messed up in the society that we're in. But that's one of the things that I appreciate about the Thai society is they still know family. To where in the West, family has been kind of eroded with individualism.
yeah. I kind of wish families were more like larger in the sense like the child was more a child of the community rather than just this little family. You know, like
Hmm.
the whole community was the parents of the child rather than just we're gonna like blockade ourselves. We're going to separate ourselves from the community as a family, you know. But instead of just having one large community, that's the family. Makes a
Right.
lot more sense.
That in fact, a lot of the communities, small farming communities in Thailand, are a family. They've always been a family. Everybody in the community is at least a half cousin or something. And so that's actually part of the attitude that if we can bring our family feelings back into our own family, that will then help us to go into the community and learn to make good close friends with other people. Also, that this is really the teaching of the Buddha when he says is that friendship is 100% of the Dhamma. It comes in
Mm.
two phases. One is we have to learn to make friends with ourselves on the inside, to start nurturing, to start giving ourselves warm fuzzies rather than cold pricklies, to stop having conceptual ideas of uh, conflict and following the rules and concepts and criticism. to stop being critical of one another. And in fact, that's what you learned, Kath, was from your family was criticism. That's what your whole family is all about. But they were doing that criticism from the perspective of wanting you to be better. They actually were doing it out of a sense of love, but the criticism kind of took over and you missed the love part of it.
Yeah. I see that really clearly now, like over the years of reflecting on the childhood stuff, you know.
Hmm. So, yes, and you had your hand up for a moment there.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on the topic of that Kata wished that families, consisted of more people. I think this is a fairly recent invention by Western societies, that nuclear family where it's like the mom, the dad, and the two children, and maybe grandfather, grandmother. And like, these old sayings usually had some truth to them, like, it takes a village to raise a child and things like that. And like my country was industrialized at a later point in time, so like 2 generations back it used to be that people lived in small villages. You knew everyone, like there were 50 people in a few houses and everyone knew everyone, and at least 3 generations lived under the same roof and things like that. So
Hmm.
it was a much more tight-knit community than what the industrialized world offers. So maybe we have lost some of that, because now when you only have like your mom and your dad, what happens if you get shitty ones? You're stuck in that situation. But like if it was like a larger net, first there would be some accountability, and there would be other I guess not parental figures, but what's the word? So other caregivers that could have given better models for you to imprint while growing up. So yeah,
Right.
unfortunately, Western society has screwed us on that point, some of us.
Yes, but that doesn't mean that we have to stay screwed. That we now know that we've got a choice, that we can come out of that and we can repair these relationships and we can set things straight. But it's going to take some effort, some right, noble effort to do that. And the place to generate that effort is by being able to clean out our own mind. But that's actually the harder part. Once we get our own mind straightened out, then learning to deal with other, even ordinary people, is kind of an easy thing to do. Why? Because you already know them very well, because we're all really alike. That I've got
Mm-hmm.
greed, they've got greed. I've got criticism, they've got criticism. And so when we recognize that we're all in this together, now we can begin to treat each other better. Rather than blaming your dad for all the ill will that you had for him, you can recognize, oh, I don't have to have that ill will at all. That he's just an ordinary guy and he can make friends with people. Bet I can make friends with him too.
Or you could just take the other advice, which was like, don't put yourself in bad situations, and
Mm-hmm.
you could just eject. Many people, just like if they don't like how they've been parented and stuff, just like separate from their family when they get the chance and go off and do their own thing. So
Mm-hmm.
I
I
don't know
was
which is
wondering.
wiser, but yeah.
Go ahead, Kath.
Yeah, I was wondering. Do you think you can empty your mind out without having to be physically doing it with the person in this? Like, if you, let's say, left the country forever, just for example, do you think you can empty the mind out to the point? Uh, or yeah, do you think you can empty the mind out when you're not physically with the person? Like,
Oh, yes, absolutely. Out of sight, out of mind is very, very common within human beings. That, in fact, for, let us say, elderly people whose parents have been dead for 30 years, they don't think about their parents very much. But young people, think about their parents a lot. Why? Because let us say that they've been away from the parents for 3 or 5 years, but they spent 20 years with the parents. So the ratio is, about 7 to 1 in the sense of having thoughts about them. But if they've been dead for 30 or 40 years, then the likelihood of you thinking about your parents is probably very low. It's probably contextual in the sense that some email comes up or some old family member mentions something or whatever like that. It's always coming up in the present moment, to where when we're young, we keep digging up our parents.
Because what I've noticed is like they get projected, even when you like the image you still have of them in your mind that's just there is being projected, even no matter where you go, because it's still kind of, you're still very much attached to them, even though you've left. Obviously, like you're far, far away. It's being projected all over the place, like, and
Yes, and that attachment is not always wholesome. We tend to continue
yeah,
to blame our parents for the situation that we're in, almost as if I've been out of the house for 5 years, but the reason I'm out of the house is because I didn't like my dad. And so we continue to blame our parents. And as I started to mention a while ago, the Buddha was actually very big on making friends with our family to clean that up. He, in fact, at one occasion made the analogy that even if you carried your parents around on your shoulders and took them to the store and to wherever they wanted to go, so that they didn't have to walk, and you did that for months and years, you still wouldn't be able to pay them for the fact that they gave you life.
yeah.
Their
But if you can
life.
show them, if you can establish them in the Dhamma, it's like you've repaid them like tenfold of what you could ever do for them or something.
Right,
That's
and
the
every
sutta.
time you smile and laugh and tell your dad that he's right, that's Dhamma.
Okay.
Making him feel good, that's Dhamma. And we actually have to practice that because we're not very good at it. In fact, one of the things that I remember about my own, let us say, teenage times, especially, is that I wouldn't compliment anybody for anything. No possible way would I say give anybody a compliment. Now, the bottom of that is that I didn't ever learn the habit of complimenting people. But now, as you see, while I'm on the air here with the Dhamma, that's what I want to do. I want to encourage students. I want to encourage people. I give them compliments so that they can see the bright side of life. And so that was a major change that I had to make to stop resisting that quality of not ever giving anybody a compliment. But I can also know where it came from, and that is that how dare me have to lift them up when they won't lift me up. That was actually it. That it was actually a selfish position that I was in. And when we recognize, oh, we don't have to do that. That in fact everybody is lifted up. Everybody feels better when we give them warm fuzzies, when we give them compliments. And that's especially true when we learn to compliment ourselves and tell ourselves, you're doing okay. You're all right, kid. You begin to love yourself, warts and all. That doesn't mean that we don't see the problems. Oh, we do see them. And we're quite willing and happy to do something about it. But most of the time we're trained to hate our darker nature and therefore not see it. And because we don't see it, we blame other people for our own problems. But if we're able to look at our own darker nature and make friends with it, then we don't blame anybody else for our own problems. We can just, that's it. Okay, so I've got an old bad habit. Never mind, I can change. And so that's what I'm encouraging you to do, Kath, is you can change your attitude and then change your behavior about your parents. We can all do that. It's a good thing for each one of us to do. Even if they're dead, we could still change our attitude about them. Anna, do you have anything to add?
Well, thank you, because it's really helpful what you said.
Good.
Yeah.
Good to see you. I'm glad that you're on.
Thank you.
So, does anybody else, Agnes or Veda or Yasin, Kat, do you have anything else to add?
Oh, yeah, I was wondering, when it comes to wholesome thoughts about your parents, um, uh, is it good to like visualize things that, or to create scenarios that never happen, but you kind of wish they happened? Because I've seen this in a lot of psychology kind of forums where people talk about how when they're dealing with inner child stuff is that they start to visualize things that they wish happened. Like they start to visualize the perfect parent scenario or something, and it can be very cathartic for people to do that. And I was wondering what do you think about that?
Yes, I would highly recommend, now that you're mentioning that, visualize you having a walk with your dad. Visualize the two of you sitting in the living room discussing something with great joy. Visualize giving your dad a hug. Visualize giving your dad a why. What do I mean? That's the Thai word, out of respect. So give yourself images of you respecting your dad. Have images of things that he is worthy of respect for. Start thinking about the good things about him. That he's a good driver, or he's a good postman, or he's good whatever it is. Allow yourself to see that he did a good job. He's good. He supported you all of these years. And so you can visualize those kinds of things. More than likely, though, without you having the wisdom to do this, the visualizations are going to be there anyway, only now the visualizations of the things that you remember having. So instead of having new visualizations and new memories, you're applying on the old ones, where you now visualize you pointing your finger at your dad, or you're visualizing him with his hands in the air, or some things like that, that indicate that the image that you've created may have actually happened in the past, but it wasn't actually a noble situation, that it was full of dukkha. So now start to have visualizations of your dad that are free from that. Start seeing yourself joyful towards him. That's what, in fact, metta would be all about. Is when we say, may all beings be happy. In this case, may your dad be happy. So start visualizing him as happy. Start seeing him as walking in the park with you. You've got a very powerful mind there, Kat. Start to use it for wholesome purposes. See your dad as a close friend. because this is exactly what we're talking about with the practice of anapanasati. The practice of metta is all the same, and that is, let's come out of our negative feelings and come have positive feelings. We can. You are in control of your feelings, but we've let them go on automatic pilot. Now it's time to change, to start taking control over the way that we feel.
I think a big change for me when you're talking about this, that happened actually quite some time ago, but the thing I discovered, I started looking for the good qualities in people. Instead of the bad ones, because about the criticizing mind, I used to do that all the time. I never almost saw anything good in people unless it benefited me in some way.
Mm-hmm.
So then I started to change that, and with that I discovered that today often people they do the same with me. And that was also a big discovery for me. What is this happening?
Mm-hmm.
So all those good things started to happen to me. Thanks to that, I think. Yeah, I couldn't see myself before people used to say I was so negative and this and that. I couldn't see it even. I didn't know what they were talking about. I didn't know, what am I doing wrong? So that was a huge change for me.
Mm-hmm.
To and what you're talking about, the smiling, and what am I supposed to do? How can I do? I didn't know anything, but just be silent. This silence can be a great gift, just to listen and just to be there and all of that. When I don't know what to do, I can just be silent and know this is a good thing. This is great to do. Yeah.
Thank you, Agnes. That was a really good testimonial. Yes, and in fact, what you're pointing out is that we're all alike. We all do that. We all start off really negative. People will tell us that we're negative, but we don't hear it. But now that you've come out of your negativity, now you can recognize that everybody's doing it. Everybody goes around being negative. And it's our job is to not be affected by their negativity, but rather to add something positive back into the mix. Expecting them to be negative. Like Kat, you're going to expect your dad to be negative for a while, but that's not going to stop you from being positive. And it'll eventually sink in.
And it's a great pleasure for me to be able to do that. Whatever their reaction is, I can be happy with that, and I can kind of be with they are the way they are because they are conditioned to be like that right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Well, Veda, you have been very quiet today. Do you have anything to add? No. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. This has been a really delightful conversation. We've had actually two parts of it. One was starting off with jhana, and then we ended up in how to actually apply that jhana when we're out in the world. So thank you all very much. I hope to see you again.
Thanks, Dhammarato. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
We'll
you
see
so
you.
much.
Yeah, we'll see you all on Skype.
Thank you so much. See you soon.
Okay. All right, guys. This has been great. Thank you.
Have a good one. Bye bye.
Okay, bye-bye.